Okay, so let's take a look at EQing in Cubase. And what I mean by EQing is essentially equalizing, which is a term that's used to manipulate the sound of any given track using a frequency spectrum, and we'll look at that in just a second. Now, there's many different ways of changing the EQ of a particular track within Cubase, and I'll go through those first. On the project window, and on the main window that you're looking at, you can get to the EQ of any track just by going over here to the left-hand side in the inspector view, and if you don't see that, you can use our tried and tested left zone toggle switch here up on the top right. And you'll notice that there is an EQ tab. So if I click on that, I get a graphic that allows me to address my built-in 4-band EQ that comes with every audio track and instrument track within Cubase. So there are larger and different EQs that have 8 bands or multi-band EQ settings, but the one that's default on every single track that comes with the software is called a 4-band parametric EQ. If this tab is not showing up on your system, then it's very easy. Go down to the bottom here. There's a little cog that says set up your inspector, and just make sure that you've got EQ activated or equalizers. If I turn that off, notice now that tab has disappeared. And if I want to add it back, then I'll just go here, equalizers, and lo and behold, it is now visible again. So you've got this little graphic that allows you to EQ the guitar track and manipulate the EQ curve. This isn't my preferred way of using EQ, but it's definitely a handy one to really quickly address some of the parameters that we're going to be changing in the next couple views. So this is the very first place that you could probably create some quick changes if you needed just from the project window. So right here, you're able to bypass and activate some of the bands that I was talking about. So if we wanted to go ahead and just click anywhere here, you'll notice it turned on my first node, my high pass, for this particular EQ curve, and I can move some of the settings just dragging my mouse around, and it will change the parameters for me here. And of course, I can bypass. So let's take a quick listen. If I solo the guitar track that this is currently on, I can tell that because it says guitar here, and this is the track that I've selected. I'll hit play, and you'll notice I'm changing the EQ just from this window very simply, and then bypassing it, turning it on and off right there. So that's one place that you can address the EQ. My preferred area that I like to work with EQ is in the mixer. So hitting F3 or going to Studio and then Mix Console will bring up the mixer that we're working with. And you can probably already see a bunch of places where EQ curves seem to be already populated. The most obvious one is right here. And as you can see, it's the exact same curve we were just looking at. I can go ahead and address that by clicking and dragging some spots right there. This is activated using the view filter right there, EQ curve. So it's the exact same curve. I just want to make sure you are aware of that. This isn't a different EQ. It's the same EQ for that track. It's just visually represented in a different area in the software. So that's the same curve there. In addition, you can see the EQ curve in the strip. So if I click on here, this is the exact same EQ curve. So if I kind of move down this section, you'll notice there is that first node that I can either bypass. As you can see, it's turning it on and off on the actual visual there. I can change the gain. I can go ahead and change the Q as well as the frequency. This will slide it from top to bottom. So by far the most common area that I use to tweak EQ on a track is by using the channel settings window, which you can get to by clicking on any of these little E or editor buttons on the mixer view, the mix console. And there it is. There's your channel settings, which has pretty much anything that you would need to do for a particular track, be it, adding inserts, to dialing an EQ, which we'll look at in just a second, to sends, as well as even moving the actual fader and the level for the track, the mute, the solo, and the pan. All of that good stuff that you would typically need to work with is available in the channel settings. Now, really quickly, I'm going to show you where you can open this exact same editor from the project window. You don't need to be in the mixer view. So it's the exact same icon. It looks like a little E. There it is, edit channel settings, and then you're going to be able to pull up the actual channel settings from that view as well. You'll notice that anything I move here is also moving in the EQ icon right there, as well as in the mixer, right? So they're all the exact same parameters. So let me just go ahead and move this down a little bit, and you should see all of the EQs are changing at the same time because they're all the same EQ. They're all the channel-based built-in EQ that comes with every track in Cubase. So looking at the actual curve a little bit more deeply now, EQ basically allows you to change the gain, which is on your y-axis here. This is the gain from 0, +6, +12, +18, +24, or -6 all the way to -24. It allows you to change the gain of a particular node or an EQ band, which is designated at a specific frequency. And your x-axis is the frequency from 20 Hertz all the way to 20 kilohertz. If you can hear 20 kilohertz, then you've got amazing hearing. Anything within kind of, 200 to 8K are really where you're going to be hearing a lot of the harmonic stuff that music kind of lives in that realm. Like I said, this is a 4-band EQ. There are 4 particular nodes that we can address and put different curves on. So that's what we're going to look at next. We're going to start with the lowest node right now and start changing some of the curves. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play. And before I do anything, I'm just going to show you, let me solo this. And what we're looking at is the harmonic representation, the EQ representation of the guitar track. And you can see, it's got a lot of, some lower ranges here as well as some highs, and then it kind of rolls off at around, it looks like maybe 7.5 kilohertz, 7,500 hertz. And that's really where the guitar lives. And what's nice is Cubase keeps a line of that for you, so you can kind of get an average of where it is, and you can kind of make changes after the fact. One quick thing just on the interface itself. So, we do have the channel strip, which we looked at earlier, but if you click on the EQ tab and go to the settings here, you can choose how you want to see your dials and parameters. So if I go to sliders, you'll notice that it's the exact same parameters, but they're just viewed differently. I like using the controls as knobs because I just find it's easier to kind of dial those in that way and kind of work with it. So that's where you get that. If you hit this little button here, it kind of resets the curve. If I hit play again, the curve will be back there again, and of course I can reset it. It's totally up to you. Sometimes it's nice to clear the curve after you've been working on it and doing things like that. Let's add some EQ. So this is a high-pass filter, and the reason it's called a high-pass filter is because it's cutting out all the low frequencies and letting all the high frequencies pass through. It's a little counterintuitive, but that's how it's named. So watch what happens when I hit play and move this high-pass filter from the left to the right. And I'm actually going to do it with the dial here, so it's easier, and I don't change any of the gain and stuff as I'm doing it. So let me hit play and we can take a listen. So I'm going to move it up, and you'll notice it's cutting out the low frequencies and letting only the highs pass. And I've pretty much cut out all of the guitar at this point, but then I'll go back and open it up again. So that's essentially what this particular node will do is just cut out the lows that you wouldn't need. And if there's noise or something, then by all means you can kind of cut out some low rumbles, and you don't need that in the mix anymore. You just want to clean it up a little bit. So that's a high pass filter. Similarly, if we want to go to the other end, we have a low pass filter. So I'm going to activate that, turn it on. And as you can see, it's pretty much doing the exact same thing on the reverse of the high-pass filter. So it's going to cut out all the highs and only let the lows come in. So if I hit play, I can cut out, I'm cutting out all the high stuff. I'm going to turn the low back, and it becomes very muffled because I've cut out all the highs, all the things that pop out in a mix. So that is a low-pass filter that you can address right there. And if I turn them back on, it looks a little bit like that. What you're also able to do, if you click on any of these little curves, you can change the type of the curve that you're working with. So if I change this to a high shelf, I now have access to, let's say I didn't want to cut out the highs. I wanted to kind of just create a nice little boost on the highs on this particular guitar part. I can do that. There we go. Or I can do it a lot, and it becomes a lot more, it'll cut through a mix. What you'll also notice, it's very subtle for this particular track, but if you look at both curves, if I reset this, you're going to see one line which is the actual representation of the audio file that we have on our track, and the other one is an indication of what the plugin or the EQ that you're adding is doing to the particular track. So you'll see two curves overlaid on each other, and you can kind of see that. It's very subtle, like I said. The light blue line is the real audio, and the one that's kind of grayed out behind it is what this effect is doing at any given time. So it's subtle, but it is there, and that is what a shelf will do, a shelf curve EQ. Of course, you can do the exact same thing on the low end. You can do a low shelf, and now it won't cut out. It'll either boost or reduce the EQ as you so choose. Now let's look at these middle two, low mids and high mids frequencies, and look at what a parametric EQ will do. I'm just going to quickly turn these other two off so we can look exactly at what this particular one is doing. Now this has some interesting characteristics. So you've got either parametric 1 or parametric 2. All that's essentially doing is changing the nature of the curvature of the actual EQ. So I'm going to gain this a little bit more and kind of raise these low mids. That's what LMF stands for, low mid frequencies. And frequency allows you, as we already know, to change where this is actually occurring. And I can double click here and type in 800 if I wanted to go to an actual frequency. Very easy to do. Let's work with this dial here called the Q, or the bandwidth. Now this allows you to fatten or narrow the curve that's happening at any particular moment. So if I take a listen to this and gain it a bit more, I can move this around and you get that kind of wah-wah effect, which is very common. This is essentially all a wah-wah pedal does, is go like this. And it allows you to really surgically manipulate or tweak or change certain frequencies depending on how big or narrow or wide you've got your Q setting. So that's what these parametric EQs curves allow you to do. One other thing I'll mention, which is quite nice, is this integration of harmonic knowledge with frequency. So what do I mean by that? As I'm moving my node, you'll notice that there is some data here that's changing, right? Well, right now it's following where my mouse is, but essentially it's populating with frequency, a note equivalent, how many cents I'm sharp or flat, and the actual gain level I'm at. So currently my mouse is sitting at 134 hertz, which is around like a C2, which is 42 cent sharp plus 15 dB. And that's really helpful because at any time that I'm working here, I can look to the top left there and see exactly what I'm doing to the note. Alternatively, if I want to go to a specific note, right now it says it's 3054 hertz. If I go to G5, for example, Cubase knows what that frequency is, and it will automatically move my node to a perfect G5, which is really helpful. As you can see, this is exactly where I want it to be, and I can EQ my instruments or my part based on key, based on notes, and that's really helpful to know when you're working with music, which is essentially what we're doing. So the last feature we'll look at right now with this particular EQ curve is this feature which allows you to do this comparative analysis between two parts. So let me explain what I mean by that. When you're doing EQ, the whole theory behind EQing is really to find frequencies that give a certain part its character, or to create space for other instruments to fit in, right? So when we're mixing, when we're creating a mix for any track, we've got a limited amount of frequency real estate, right? We've got from, maybe 30 hertz all the way to 10K, and all of the music needs to live within that same frequency spectrum. So essentially everything's competing in one sense or another. That's where the art of mixing and EQing effectively can really shape and make your mixes stand out. A guitar and a bass share a lot of similar frequencies. Obviously, the bass will have more low ends and the guitar will have more high ends, but there's overlap, right? What Cubase allows you to do with this feature that I'm about to turn on is compare your EQ curves of any two different tracks so that you can effectively EQ each of them to work better together. It's really easy to set up. So I've got my guitar track soloed right now. That's all I'm going to hear. here. But let's say I wanted to do a comparative EQ work right now. So I've got my guitar. It's by default, it selects a track that you're on. And I want to compare it to another track. So I'm going to go here. And as you can see, it's listing all of the other tracks in my project. I'm going to say, please load up the bass as a comparative source. So if I hit play now, I don't hear the bass because I don't have it soloed also, but I can see the curve of the EQ curve in orange of the bass. So let me just turn it on. And now they're playing together and I can see them together. And that's really, really helpful because now I can intelligently see what the overlap is like, right? So it looks like there's a little bit of conflict here. So maybe I don't want to boost that there. I want to move this over and increase the Q here for this guitar part because by then the bass is kind of rolling off. And I don't want to compete here with some of the bass frequencies. And similarly, maybe I'll put this high pass EQ back in. I'll roll in the high pass. And kind of get rid of all these frequencies that are going to be competing with the bass unnecessarily. And now it should sound a little cleaner. And it does. You know, if I put that back, now they're conflicting a bit. But now I can really hear the bass a lot more, and the reason for that is because those frequencies are not competing anymore and they're more complementary. Another thing I'll mention, which is quite handy, is let's say you're starting with EQ from the beginning. I'm going to say no comparison. I'm just going to reset this and I'm back to my guitar EQ channel. And I'm starting with EQ. I'm completely new to the whole idea of EQ and I'd love Cubase to help. Well, guess what? We have the tools for you. There are absolutely hundreds of presets that you can use for any of these plugins. It doesn't have to be EQ. It could be any of the plugins, compressors and stuff. But essentially, we have presets that are there to help you get started and give you a great starting point for then a little bit more tweaking and things like that. To get to your presets, you just click on this little square, the preset manager, and I'm going to say load a preset. And what's going to happen if I didn't have guitar already typed in there, you'll get a window that populates with all of these presets that are already in the software that are waiting for you to address. And there's hundreds of them. So I typed in guitar because I'm working on a guitar. And I'm going to say a rock guitar here. And I'll double click. And look at that. It's gone ahead and created a typical EQ curve for a guitar. It's cutting out the lows, as we were doing anyway, and then also cutting out some of the highs, which are frequently not there. So this is a typical guitar EQ. And of course, I can change this if I wanted. I'm not set in stone on any of that, but it gives you a great starting point to be able to start working with your EQ and get you going with something that would be typical for that particular instrument. Now, the last way to add EQs is to use the inserts. And this is where you can open up the whole gamut of different types of EQs. Like I said, up until now, we've been dealing with the channel EQ that is built into absolutely every track in Cubase. That's either an audio track, a group track, or an instrument track. But there are third-party plugins and inserts. Obviously, Cubase gives you a bunch of additional EQ inserts, and we're going to look at them right now. So if I click on here and go to EQs, you can see I've got a bunch of here third-party EQs, but I'm going to navigate down to Studio EQ, which is one that we want to work with first. And there it is, Studio EQ. And you'll notice it looks quite similar, right, in terms of the shape and some of the parameters that we're looking at. And that's very common. EQs will typically have, your gain on the y-axis and then your frequency on the x-axis, which is very similar to this. Now, before I start working with this particular EQ, I do want to bypass and deactivate what's going on here, or otherwise I'm going to have two EQs working at the same time. I'm going to hit the bypass button, which is this little circle here, which turns yellow and allows me to bypass what's going on here. Alternatively, of course, I can bypass the actual nodes themselves so that there's actually nothing going on there. So that would be doubly safe. I've got nothing on in terms of the nodes as well as everything is bypassed. And now anything that I do on my studio EQ will be exactly what I'm hearing. So this is, the same sort of idea. If I turn the spectrum on, I can see the curve that probably looks really familiar now. I can turn certain spectrums on. I can, you've got the same sort of options, your type of shelf. I'm going to, lower the frequency, raise the frequency. I can do that there. I can gain and reduce. The same sort of concept, same sort of idea that you have in the built-in EQ, but it's got a little bit of a different character and might have some additional functionality. They have their own characteristic sound, their own parameters. One that's quite nice for this particular EQ is this idea of gaining. And I'll explain what that does. Let me just move this back next to the fader. So when we raise EQ, and you should be aware of this, let me just raise the volume of this track a little bit more, and maybe we can make it clip. When you gain any of these parameters, it's like having a fader that goes up to plus 30 dB for that particular EQ range. So if I raise this all the way here to plus 24 dB, I might clip the track, and I did. Look, it's totally peaking. I'm getting a red indicator that's telling me, okay, Kev, you've gone way over here. You're plus 34. You need to dial this back. I also get a red indicator here that tells me how much I've clipped. But what you can do with this particular studio EQ is you can counteract that by going to minus 11. And now I'm getting the sound, the EQ of the curve that I want, but I'm not clipping the actual track. So it's quite helpful to be able to do that and have that functionality. So the auto button's even better because it does this automatically for you. So I'm just going to put this back at 0 and hit auto. And any changes I do now to the EQ curve, Cubase is automatically going to compensate to make sure that I don't clip. So that's one of the nice features about the Studio EQ, is this auto feature that will dial in and make sure that whatever EQ you're doing, it's going to compensate for and make sure that you don't clip your track. Whereas if you boosted this a whole bunch, you're just immediately going to clip, and you definitely don't want to do that. So lastly, just like the other plugin where you needed to save a preset, you can do that with any of these inserts. And that's done right here in the preset window. You can load a preset. You'll find this on all the plugins in Cubase, and you'll have the same sort of features. I'm going to load a rock guitar again, and there we go. We have the same preset ready to go for us to work with and save. And of course, you can choose and move any of these and then save it, save preset, and then you'll be able to address this moving forward anytime you reload Cubase for another project in the future.